What's going on, guys? Baller here. Welcome to my first video. Today I want to make a fairly long and in-depth video on why Team Liquid is struggling right now, and in my opinion, ways to improve the team. And in this, even before we consider like roster moves and stuff like that, there's just some initial kind of hot fixes, and then later on we can talk about roster moves, as you'll see later on in the presentation. But right now, Team Liquid, they're number 15 on HLTV, and they're number 23 on Valorant. If you know anything about the history of Team Liquid as an organization, this is not good enough. They obviously, from about 2016, when they had around the time they had Simple, they had their kind of magical run top four at MLG Columbus, until about the time they kicked the Legion Nitro. For a vast majority of that time, Team Liquid has been a top 10 team in the world for a vast majority of that time. At times, multiple cases even top 5 in the world. At one point, number 1 in the world. So for the content of the org size, this org does have money. They did spend money. It's not like this is some cheap org or an org that tries to go for younger players like a Gamer Legion or a more natural team like a Mongol / Aurora, where only recently have these teams have any sort of budget. And even Mongols still fairly low budget. Only recently has Aurora started getting actual salaries. So especially considering that Team Liquid have big salaries, these are big buyouts and stuff. Team Liquid are clearly not doing good enough. And so in this video, I made a Google presentation of why Team Liquid is bad and their problems and how to fix them. It's a couple of pages where we're talking about the history of Team Liquid's issues for a couple of years now. Obviously, what we can maybe do short term to help fix some of the issues, add an extra 10%. And then more long term fixes, either be like roster moves or style issues and stuff like that. So first transition, how did we get to this point? Because Team Liquid didn't just start being bad. At some point, Team Liquid were again a top 10 team. Admittedly, we're thinking more about the Liege, Nitro, and Yekindar era. They weren't like the best team in the world. They weren't going to win a tournament, but they can make the odd semifinal, the odd final. Especially considering they still had a North American core, still 4 North American players. Especially in the era where like the second best North American team Complexity was at best like a minor upset bait. This is still somewhat impressive. So summer 2023, obviously they benched the Liege because he'd been struggling as an aggro lurker when he'd always been an entry rifle at best, especially around times like 2019 during the on Krieg meta during the Grand Slam run. And Nitro, obviously, longtime England leader, has became the England leader around outside of some brief snippets in 2016, had became the full-time England leader in late 2017 to replace Stanislaw, who Stanislaw himself became the primary lurker. And obviously, he had spent time in Valorant around 2020 when quote-unquote Stewie scared him off or whatever the narrative is, and then Fallen did it for a long time. And they brought back Nitro in 2022 when Fallen went to do the Imperial project. And they had Shox because they thought Naf was leaving to EG, but then that's a long story. Then obviously they got Yekindar when Shox suffered because you can't have Shox and Naf on the same team. Think about Shox when he's at his best. And obviously Nitro went back to Valorant a second time and then came back again. That's another discussion. Liege went to Complexity, thrived there despite the team being more limited, had some upset potential, was for at certain times better than Team Liquid. Admittedly, by the end, Team Liquid were the better team. But reasonable chunks of this time, Complexity had more upset potential. But still, they obviously, in summer 2023, they picked up Patsy and Waynewaker because you think about the roles in North America, there was no in-game leader that it was even at the level of Nitro. Because when you went down below Nitro, you had like Walco, you had like freaking, I'm thinking like, it's like really tough. I'm thinking like, I think the IGL from at the time, Boss, I think it was was it Freshie? Like, there's not, like, you're talking about the IGL options were very limited at this time. And so, obviously, Yekindar took it because it's like, who else can do it? Like, OC's the Opera, NAF is something who wanted to do it. And at the time, there was no obvious EU IGL because, think about at the time, it's on 2023. The best England leaders were pretty much on the best teams. Like, outside of some people questioning Hooks, he's the IGL and G2. Like, everyone knows Kane's a very game leader. No shot gonna leave Heroic. Carrion's a legendary England leader. He's not leaving FaZe Clan. Snappy's Ents just won Dallas. He's not going to go to Team Liquid. Like, I can keep going. Like, Alexi just did the Navi International project that just started. So, the IGL market is non-existent. And when it comes to players to replace a Liege 1-on-1, Patsy was a decent option. He'd shown some good form and spirit. Admittedly, not consistently, but mainly did it at the majors and had wrecked Team Liquid at IM Rio and even did it at, both at EPL and had gone to 3 rounds against Team Liquid at IM Katowice and even beat them at Cologne in the first round in fact 2022. So Patsy had the experience of beating up Dap's coach Team Liquid and the old roster multiple times. Had a good record against them actually in direct head-to-head. So it's obviously going to help. And Patsy did have impact at the time. And since Yekindar is going to be the in-game leader, it makes sense to add Patsy as an entry player The problem was Rainwaker, and not because he's like a smart player, can't be a lurker. The problem is Rainwaker is something you would replace NAF with, not Nitro, or not to replace what like an aggro lurker would be, right? Now you have two passive lurkers instead of an aggro lurker and a passive lurker. Had Honeymoon Blastfall Groups that beat FaZe in G2, lost FaZe second time, bombed out a clone plan, didn't make playoffs EPL, lost to Ents round 1 at Gamers 8. And then they started tanking, and then they had to rebuild. They briefly adapted Young for that when Blastfall Showdown. It was a mess. They changed 3 players because they had to add Cadian, which meant OC was benched as well. They lost all their VRS. They had to re-qualify for Copenhagen through the open qualifiers. They added Cadian because obviously he had revived his career under Heroic for 4 years. Yeah, for about 4 years or so. He even overthrew Snappy as the main game leader in Heroic. And Skulls, who had some promise in Pain, had shown some decent run form against some alright competition. And the key thing is that it kept them Americas, because they're adding a second European player. And despite a couple, like an upset against G2 at Chengdu, going 3 matches against FaZe Clan, despite the odd playoff finish, despite having like having some close calls, they never really looked that great as a lineup. And in my opinion, I would estimate around the time they failed to make the major, Twitch just took over Cadian as the leader of the team, and basically kind of neutering Cadian as purpose in the team. After benching both of them, that JKS Ultimate made Twist the IGL. Initially had the overpoints at Blastfall Groups, and even when they dropped off, they still were like the 7th to 8th best team. They could beat up the field, but when they played the FaZe Clans, the G2s, the Vitalities, when they played Spirit in Shanghai, they lost out. Despite, again, some competitiveness, like they could take maps against G2, could take maps against Vitality, they couldn't get over the finish line. So, despite a couple quarterfinal finishes, still no like big top 4 finishes, and it felt like Twist IGLing limited his individual level. And Ultimate's Honeymoon early on tricked people into thinking team had the firepower and the calling to keep up with better teams, either be better firepower like G2, better game like Na'Vi or Vitality, like obviously the best player in the server like Donk on Spirit, etc. They eventually bench Yekindar for Nerfs to be add a bit of firepower, and Nerfs can be somewhat aggressive. Admittedly, I think they're still lacking an entry element, but Nerfs could at least improve the C size. He does play similar positions. They don't really improve. They had a Corvon at Pro League, but outside of that, it looked fairly unremarkable. They bench AKS for Shuhei to relieve Twist of IGLing, because at the time, Team Liquid still thought they were going to be Americas because the Middle East was like a wild card region still. And so, technically, that's to keep themselves Americas, and NAF's also a franchise player, despite JKS being in slightly better form. They don't get better. They had the quarterfinal in Melbourne, they upset Na'Vi, but outside of that, like they bombed Bucharest, went 0-3 with the major, looked very touch and go. Cologne, they made the main event, but didn't really do much otherwise. Like they struggled with FlyQuest. Okay, they've had a good result Bounty right now, but like that's so recent, and they still have so much of like they still have so much more work to like get back up on the VRS. So as you've seen, Team Liquid, despite consistently making right choices, like they got rid of the players, barring when Elijah obviously game bench because of their struggles, probably Nitro leaving because of Valorant. From the Patsy Rainwaker and onward, the last 2 or 3 cycles, they made the right choice in my opinion. They got rid of Kendo, who was struggling, got rid of Kane, who was failing as a leader. They added Shuhei, who was doing good with Mouse. They made a bunch of good moves, but none of it's working. And the insult to injury is TL now being considered Europe because Middle East. That's why GG Hao is now considered Europe. That's why like Israeli players are now European players because they're obviously for ping reasons and for distance reasons. Because now Team Liquid, as of the August 4th VRS, they are now 17th in Europe. And so obviously that means they're not going to be in invite ranges. They obviously bombed out of the EPL qualifier, lost the Blast Open qualifier. Blast London qualifier. Funnily enough, got the invite anyway because of the Mongols dropping out. And so, even though Team Liquid are going to Blast Open, still those games are online. EWC, they're going to play Vitality first round. That's pretty much a guaranteed auto loss. So TL's got to go crazy. And like any opportunity they have left, either online or on land, they got to go crazy, basically. And there's only about 2 months, less than 2 months actually, because it'll be October 6th, the deadline, the cutoff for the Budapest Major, to make the major, obviously, which is important. And so here's some, before we talk about Team Liquid as a team, this is just ways to improve Team Liquid before we talk about like roster moves and overhauls and stuff. Just because it's obvious Team Liquid don't have the money anymore because they spent so much money getting Cadian, getting Skulls for allegedly $500,000. Nurse was cost a pretty penny. Shuhei probably cost a reasonable amount of money. So the TL can't just keep buying players. They have to just eventually just settle and find a way to make the roster move. And they just got a coach, obviously. These aren't cheap options. And the coach came from Navi, so I'm assuming Navi's not going to put a little tax on that one. And so here are just some ways we can improve Team Liquid. The map veto pick ban. Team Liquid has no business not playing Overpass. First of all, Overpass replaced Anubis, which is their best map. That's an important thing to mention. Secondly, there's an obvious ban to ban Dust2, which is the core of this team, and Ultimate JKS have been 8-16 on land. It's a bit of a zoomed in screenshot so I can fit the slide, but 8-16 on land, and their wins aren't that impressive. It's like their best win against Falcons, and that was like a 13-9. And they beat the old Fury. Admittedly, those teams do play Dust2, but and those were not convincing wins, and they still have a lot of losses, and some bad losses too as well. They lost that same Fury back at the Shanghai Armor on that map. A lot of losses to Vitality. Admittedly, most of the teams are pretty good Dust2 teams, but they're getting rinsed 13-5, 13-6 on these games, right? They should ban Dust2, especially because a lot of teams play it. Spirit play it, Vitality play it, Mongols are decent on it, Aurora love to play it, freaking Falcons play it. Admittedly, Falcons are on a losing streak on recent, but used to love playing it. Everyone plays Dust2 to some degree, besides Na'Vi. And even Na'Vi floated it against the Straws and beat them on it. And the core of that Na'Vi team last year was very good on it. So they should ban Dust2. Too many teams play it. They should, instead of focusing on Mirage, as you've seen, 4-13 on LAN. These are LAN records. Online, they won a couple games. Obviously, they beat VP Prodigy on it. They beat Sashi on it. So they won a couple online games. But on LAN with this core, they're 4-13 on that map. And with Shuhei, generally, I think online, they're 2-6. I think with Shuhei on that map, since adding him on LAN, I think it's winning against Pain, and then I think when he's Virtus Pro, I think it's not a lot of wins. It's a pretty dismal record. And on top of that, again, similar to Dust2, everyone plays Mirage. So many teams play it. Spirit plays it. It's not their best map, but they're down to play it. Mao's record recently is mixed, but they love playing this map. Vitality's I think they're 6-2 on LAN, the last 8 on it, and the only losses are against Mongols, Mao's other good Mirage teams. Aurora likes to play it. Na'Vi likes to play it. FaZe can play it. It's not their best map. Everyone plays Mirage. So I feel trying to pick Mirage into everyone is suicide. Focus more on Inferno, Ancient, two maps that the Twisted IGL era, these are two maps that rarely portrayed them. It was always on the higher end of their map pool. They were decent on these maps. I think 13-0 G2 on Ancient. They beat Na'Vi multiple times on Inferno. They can always compete in these shots and focus more on Inferno, Ancient, less Mirage. Have Mirage is a decider because everyone's going to let you play it. Focus more on Inferno, Ancient as the picks. Against Mongols, pick Inferno. Don't pick Mirage. Against Mao's, picks. Again, Mao's okay. Picking Mirage, that Inferno, that makes sense. Maybe next time pick Ancient instead, but if it's available. But pick these maps, don't pick Mirage against FaZe Clan. Pick Inferno into FaZe Clan, which you beat last time when FaZe Clan picked into you at the Cologne play. And that's with a good T half, by the way. You get maybe 6 CT rounds. Focus on these maps more, in my opinion. Secondly, CT side problems. Especially you notice this on Dust2. I noticed on Team Liquid CT side is very individualistic. I misspelled individualistic, but that is beside the point. I can visualistic. Fix that. Again, especially I noticed against V Prodigy, times where Shuei's by himself at long, he gets pop flash and he dies, or on a map like Mirage, I see so many times where Nurse is by himself on shore, doesn't have a second player to help him, or a pop flash to push Catwalk or something. It feels so separate. Outside the odd time, I noticed on Dust2 where sometimes they'll do maybe a double mid push where they shoot through the Xbox smoke and try to get some kills on the Catwalk. But outside of that, they're not that mobile on CT side. Relative to the Vitalities of the world, the Maos of the world that are pretty mobile on CT side, especially because Shuei's not especially love to push for CT info. I think that's so important. They need to be more mobile. I'm not saying they have to be just straight pushing all the time. They don't have to go for crazy pushes like 30 Max, as an example, who do too much support. It can be kind of a bit of a losing factor at times if people know what they're going to do. But don't be so reliant on skill, especially because teams don't have the form to justify playing so separate. On T side, I feel like Team Liquid I feel like they're going for too many set rounds. I noticed against Fury on Mirage, they went for a few too many set rounds to the point where it actually kind of hindered them. I feel like Fury knew what they were going to do every time. I don't mind a couple set rounds. I don't mind some executes on Mirage. For example, it's pretty easy to get the bomb down. I don't mind some set execute rounds on an H, for example, where you can just throw the long and short smokes and get bomb down on B as an example. But you need to play some default rounds. I prefer Team Liquid going more hyperactive, kind of aggressive default, like a Vitality Maos, and less Na'Vi Spirit style, run the clock down, old school Strawless style. I prefer them, if they're going to do more default stuff, to be more hyperactive because they have enough skill, and the core of the team's played for long enough to point I think they can do that. Spirit kind of get away with playing a bit more separate because they have the best player in the world. They have such a good opera who likes to play slow like Shiro. They can justify it. And Navi's core's been on for so long, and they have Blaze as a coach, and Alexius Nigel who likes to play more meticulous and a bit less in your face. So they're allowed to play that style, even if their flaws, even both the hyperactive and the more slow default style, right? It can have the qualities and negatives to both, but for Team Liquid did more of the former than the latter. Next, what should TL do when they make a roster move? If they do a roster move, assume Team Liquid probably don't go do anything crazy. Maybe make the odd quarterfinal finish, but nothing crazy. While purely on form, Nafi's obvious choice. But given I think Naf's actually been playing decent the last few months, and again he's a franchise player, and he plays harder positions, I think the real player to remove is Nerds. Given Nerds has been playing pretty bad since the break. Outside when he first debuted on like Katowice and Bounty where he looked pretty good, he's been very dismal for a couple months now, and he plays pretty good roles, and he's European. Like, there's so many reasons to like not have Nerds on the team, especially because like outside of the rumor that Overdrive is throwing around with the Twisted Leash swap, obviously if that happens, I think you just keep the rest of the roster at that point. But if nothing else happening, and assuming Team Liquid's got to run this lineup, run the course for this lineup for the rest of the season, I think Nerds is the obvious person to remove. Despite the buyout, and despite obviously assuming having a reasonable contract on him, I don't think he's worth the money personally. Even though he's a very good player, I don't want Nerds as my main entry player. Especially because yes, Twist does go for entries, but I prefer like FaZe Clan era Team Twist is like your aggro lurker kind of can opener, less main entry, if that makes sense, right? And I think Nerds is more replaceable, especially considering he's European. So who should they replace for Nerds? There's a couple options here. You can go for Lake if you want to go more Americas, you want to get easier qualifications to the major, and he's a player who's played some international events. Admittedly, he's like some untapped potential. He's like an alright player. And yes, you can say, hey, is he that great of like a second star, third star? Yeah, you can question if he's not like a world beater, but given the fact that he's still very, very young in his career, he's only been playing internationally for about a year and a half now. It's not like he's been around for a long time. He's like a known player he can't improve. This is kind of, again, come on, I have a lot of options. You have Flamus in versus Pro, currently benched. He's obviously a player you want as an entry. He can play rotator like Nerds did, instead of being forced to play like support roles and can kind of neuter like Electronic did. He's a very young age. He can contribute. Admittedly, he's always had issues against the really elite teams, even in Gamer Legion. But keep on, Team Liquid are known for being elite teams is like the first focus. It's like that's like the third or fourth step they need to get to. Tessus and Falcons, obviously, I'm going to assume Falcons, assuming they don't like win the major, they probably replace Tessus for an actual anchor like a Bit or a Yimfat, if they have the money for it. Obviously, maybe Bit doesn't think Navi's worth it, even if Makaza ends up being better than Jail. Maybe they think there's still bigger issues. Maybe the map pool's still an issue. Maybe they think they're still like 5% away from being as good as they were last year. Maybe like Bits available for Falcons. The Test is available as again more of an entry player, an impact player, less star, can be like a third star. You have Fame and Virtus Pro, pretty good English for more of like, and you see him in interviews. He plays anchor, which means Shua can play rotator again, like he in Mouse. He's an experienced player. He's just enough skill to be kind of a third star. Again, he's not a world beater, but again, not at all an alright option. You Imma and Navi, again, if you want like an entry player, someone who's played Shuhei, has thrived with Shuhei in the past, and again, like experienced player, at times can be a very good player. Had a very good Cologne just now, so clearly he's not completely tapped out. He's gas left in the tank. And then lastly, XFOD. I made this slide before XFOD got re-added. I made this slide yesterday before XFOD got re-added to Heroic. I assumed he'd just stay benched. I didn't know Tenier was going to Spirit to rumor to replace Zontix. So admittedly, this one obviously would be less likely because I'm assuming they're just going to just add him, reinstate him back to the roster. You probably have to buy him out if you want to get him. But XFOD is like an aggro rifler, has impact rounds. Not super great against the really elite teams, but generally pretty good against like the top 20 to 30 level. Impact player, did have a good Dallas, had some good games in the major. So he's a reasonably experienced player, very young in age, explosive player, someone who wants to go first. So again, these are just a couple of options I think are worth mentioning. There's probably a couple others I forgot about. These are just some ones I think are worth mentioning. Then we're talking about NAF replacements. In case you think NAF can't figure it out, or maybe you still think Nerds can make it work if you give him time. Here's just a couple ones I think are worth kind of considering. You Shush and NIP. Again, admittedly, I doubt NFP's going to let you have him, but he's an experienced player. He plays in some very similar roles to NAF. And someone's gone deep in tournaments, won international tournaments multiple times, gone deep in international tournaments, like 4 or 5 major playoff finishes. Stable player. Admittedly, not a world beater, but again, to replace NAF, you don't have to be amazing. You just have to be at least good. You have Norbert versus Pro, who I think is still bench, which is crazy. Sport player, very good seat side, especially on maps like Overpass, especially on maps like Mirage, especially on maps like Inferno. He can have pretty good CTS at times. He's not a world beater, but again, we're just replacing NAF. We're not replacing like to making a 3rd star all of a sudden. And then the one I recently added is actually Nick X, who since the break around like Cologne playing Fissure and this series against Heroic at Blast Bounty, Nick X actually been playing well recently. He's actually honestly been playing better than Halzer. He's actually become like a decent, like a respectable support player actually the last couple months. Even when he didn't have good stats around like Bucharest when they made the semis and like that was when Halzer and Grimp went AWOL and went crazy. Nick X was always somewhat stable in his output, especially on CT's out Overpass we've seen recently, especially on Inner on Train. He's very stable. He's good for one every single time. And he's still America, so you want to kind of keep the spirit there. These are just a couple players I think are worth considering. In conclusion, I think we could have a lot of problems. It's like team play issues, map pool issues, many different issues, right? But with some of these changes, and obviously at the end of the season, maybe a roster change, I think Team can at least get an extra 5 to 10% here. And the point of this video is to just say that many things they could change to improve. Not in the sense of like, oh, just cut 2 players and just start over again. Cause I think it's a waste of time. We've seen Team play in multiple iterations, just keep cutting players, and it's not fixing the problem. And these are just some little things I think they can do to improve. So, if you guys do enjoy this video, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.